So if anybody doesn't know me, I'm David Linderman. I am not Craig Beasley. Craig is out diving, so it's a valid excuse for the president to miss a meeting. So Craig asked me to kind of step in for him. I had done this before, so he thought I could handle it. I don't see any visitors. Do we have any visitors on Zoom? I don't see any visitors on Zoom either. Okay, so we'll keep moving here. Anybody been diving lately? Okay, what do you got to say?
I just spent last week, 2 weeks ago, in Grand Cayman yet again, trying to get my Primate certification, and did succeed this time because the instructor didn't have ear problems, thank God. All I can say is 200 foot. That's where things are happening in Grand Cayman. Everything's dead.
Huh.
You know, so no, I don't.
Oh, here.
Could y'all hear that at all? Anybody?
No.
Oh,
Okay.
repeat it.
So, spent 2 weeks ago, I spent a week in Grand Cayman getting my Trimix certification. And that certification basically goes down to 200 feet with Trimix. One interesting comment that I do have about that is that we did all sorts of depths from 100 foot down on air through the week. Eventually got to 170. I can tell you that I actually felt 170. Okay, I felt it big time. People were talking to me like, Scott, look at your watch. What's doing Trimix, 200 feet? Nothing. Nada, zip. It was like, oh yeah, great day in the park, Man, it was wonderful. But the deco obligation from doing that is like horrendous. So anyway, it was a fun time. Had an excellent time.
Well, good, and congratulations on your.
So you enjoyed your two martini dive?
All right, anybody else been diving? How about you Zoomers? Justin, I'm pretty sure you've been somewhere.
Yeah, I was in
Alex.
I was in Bimini 2 weeks ago with the Hammerheads at Neil Watson. It was pretty awesome.
Awesome. Good. I've seen a couple of pictures on Instagram of yours, so I know you saw Hammerheads. Yeah,
it was really good. It's quite the experience. I was only there for 3 days in and out, but it's quite the experience. I'd probably do it again.
Awesome. I want to do that. It's on my list, but it's a little bit cooler water than I like, so I haven't got up to it yet.
I was definitely layered up. I'm not gonna lie. It was probably, I don't know, mid 70s down there, low 70s.
Yeah,
but I can't complain after doing Iceland. I should never complain about cold water.
Yeah, no, everything's warm compared to Iceland.
Everything is warm compared to that.
All right, well, good. Alex, are you on there still? Have you been diving? Have you been busy changing diapers and stuff? He was on there. I don't know if he's still on there. Anyways, okay. I have a reminder.
Changing diapers.
Changing diapers mostly. All right. Next month, Alex, we've got some big news from you. Okay.
Yeah, March I go. March I'll go. We're going to Roatan.
Okay. All right. So the April meeting, you'll be telling us about it. Sounds good. It's 2025, so 2025 dues are due. And Javon will be happy to take your money, or you can pay on the HUPS.org website via PayPal. On, when was that? The 25th of January, we had the TGCC banquet, and that's when a lot of the dive clubs in the area, most of them present their awards, and HUPS also gave out their awards there. We gave out Member of the Year to Javon Pruitt, Advanced Photographer of the Year to Justin Wallace. Congratulations on Zoom there, Justin. Intermediate was awarded to Jennifer Opila Misk. I can never pronounce her name properly. Novice Photographer of the Year was Sage Holt. In the fall, video feature length winner was Craig Beasley. And the short video winners were Scott Singleton. It was a tie. Scott Singleton and myself. And Scott, I have your award up here, so come on.
Come on up, Scott.
Come get it.
It's an honor to even be in the same class as El Presidente here.
El former Presidente.
El former Presidente.
Come on, get up there.
All right, let's see, this way.
All right.
It's in the bag still, but it's okay. Cheese.
Are you ready? One more. There we
All
go.
right, close enough.
Thank you.
All right, sure. Here, take your bag so you don't damage it on the way home.
Take the bag. Okay.
Okay, let's see, what else we got here? Anybody have announcements like Frank? I figured you would.
Just
Come
a
on.
second. Here we go.
Three quick ones. Yes, we did have the banquet. It was really awesome. A lot of people showed up. There was one announcement the dive community needs to know about, and that is Bay Area Divers has merged with Lunar Fins. And I think they did that effective January 9th. Second thing is that the Diving Council is again offering a $500 scholarship this year. The applications are in the newsletter on the website. So if you meet the qualifications, your family meets the qualifications, or you're interested, please complete those and get those in. And then the last thing would be that Aqua, our charity, again, is January basically is the supporter month where people that are basically interested in supporting the charity and its administration give their contributions. It's a $20 contribution a year. And that is the only type of donation that pays for the running of the charity. Say all other donations, we pass through 100%. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Frank.
Let me talk just a bit.
Okay,
You might talk a little bit as well, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what we did back in January 12th and the 3rd. What was it? The
18th.
18th.
January
Yeah,
18th.
that was the 18th, one day before I turned 80. That's right. I remember now. And yeah, I know you're older than I am. Thank you. I appreciate not being the oldest. But we went down and we had 6 people that presented at the mixed match at the Match Theater downtown. And we had been invited there because of our participation for the last several years with our film festival. And it was 6 of us. We had Craig and Betsy Beasley, who are off busy diving in Buceo, Antelope, on one of the trips that they pumped a bunch of money in and got the raffle ticket picked. So they're off free. But David was in it. I was in it. Paul Cater Deaton, and our Justin Wallace. Wave, Justin. Okay, there you go. All right. And it was good. We actually had some people show up. It went off smoothly. We got out of there in an hour and stuck around for listening to drums, and then went and had a few drinks and went home. It was fun. We had a good time. Maybe we'll do it again. Okay, David.
all right, so the next big event coming up besides our regular monthly meetings is the Houston Underwater Film Festival, of course, April 12th and 13th. Everybody should have it on their calendars. Let's see,
Yeah, buy the whale package. That'll be help us.
the whale shark package. Anybody else have any announcements they need to share? All right, moving along. Dennis, do you have a gadget of the month?
I do have a gadget of the month. And it's not a cheap gadget though. Let me get it. Let me see. I'm gonna just hold it up here. And the reason that I have it is because as you get older, sometimes you get things like macular degeneration and your eyesight goes to crap. And when you're doing video, or you're looking at that little screen at the back of your camera, you don't know what the hell you're doing. And so what I have here is the anglerfish monitor. Not a cheap date, but it's a lot less expensive than the one you can get from Nauticam and the Atlas.
Can't hear you.
Oh, okay. I put my microphone down. There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Good. So it's really kind of cool. It has a little pigtail here that connects to another little pigtail that goes down through one of the openings in the top of the housing and connects to the HDMI port on your camera. And I've had this for like about 4 years, and the last I finally said, okay, it's time to make sure I get it done. The problem I'd had is that the HDMI cable in the original one that they sent me did not connect well with the camera. And so it was, sometimes it was on and most of the time it wasn't, so I wasn't using it. So I asked him to give me another one and he did, and it worked. Voila. And I put this on the top of my housing and I can look at it from like a 45-degree angle while my camera is down on the sand and it's a tripod. I love it. I really do love it. I can see things again. So my gadget.
Cost.
This what cost was about $1,500 when I bought it.
So did you have to have your housing modified?
No, I did not. I did
You
have to
already
buy,
had
I had to buy a transition piece, a little bulkhead transition that fit into it. That would screw into this right here. But this connects to another pigtail that goes down inside. But it's really cool. It's not nearly as big as the ones that Marty and next month's presenter is going to give. We have McGill.
Nancy?
Yeah, Nancy McGill is going to be presenting next month, and she was on that trip as well. And she has an enormous housing, full frame, bigger than life, everything. She calls it the beast, and it really is. So, but hers is like twice as big as mine, but it holds enough batteries to last her the whole day, 4 or 5 dives. She goes that much. Mine, I have to change out every day, every dive. Okay, that's it.
Did it change the buoyancy of the rig?
I don't know. Probably it's a little heavier than it probably needs. I have to put a little bit.
Clearly not noticeable. So that's a good answer.
I haven't really weighed it. What do you think it weighs? 3 pounds, 2 pounds? It's about 2 pounds, and it's got some extra space inside. So maybe 1 pound heavy. It definitely would sink if I put it in the water and dropped it. But I don't do that. Okay.
Okay, Dennis, I think it's your time to introduce the program.
Well, I'm not going to introduce our speaker. I'm going to tell you who he is. He's Mark Strickland, and I'm going to let Jesse
Hey, Beverly.
do the introduction. Can you give him full screen?
No, I was in a meeting, but I walked out.
So Dennis, can you hear me okay?
No, it's okay.
Yes,
Can
we
everybody hear
can.
me?
Yeah, so,
Okay,
you know, my
hey,
dad,
so, hey, I want to just say hi to everybody. I'm zooming in from Cape May Point, New Jersey.
Okay.
Just got in from Virginia Beach earlier today with our daughter and 2 grandsons. But happy to be here. This is our new home
Okay.
for anybody who hasn't figured that out yet. But so okay, I'm going to introduce Mark.
yeah,
Mark and I go back to March of 2009. I know that's 16 years ago. But Mark and I and Doug Perrine, who is a mutual friend, the 3 of us got together for a week of diving with, and this is one of the most incredible dive trips I've ever been on. Sailfish in the wintertime off the northern part of Isla Mujeres. It's where you can photograph sailfish. And it was Mark, Doug Perrine, and I for a week. And so Mark was my roommate and buddy on the trip with Doug. And that's where we met and had a fantastic time. Mark is an incredible underwater photographer. He produces images that are really eye-popping. You know, he's been published in books, magazines, and, you know, has traveled around the world. Very accomplished guy. I mean, I'm sure you'll be impressed with the images that he has to show you tonight. He runs trips around the world. But I want to go back to the sailfish for a minute, because I heard Mark talking to Dennis earlier, 10 minutes ago about the sailfish trip and about a actual a woman who, wasn't it in Thailand where the sailfish bill punctured her? And I remember we were both in this room. Actually, it was a garage apartment of a friend of mine who has a house in East Harris, and he let us use his garage apartment. And so we're laying in bed talking about, hey, tomorrow we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And I'd never been in the water with a sailfish. And I said to Mark, I said, hey, have you ever heard of anybody getting impaled by a swordfish? And he goes, oh yeah. And then he told me the story, and I'm thinking, oh my God, because you're thinking about going in the water with just a wetsuit on, and you've got these swords, bills. And what if one, you have to get close. You have to really, really get close. I mean, you're within just a few feet of them with a wide angle lens. And I thought, well, what in the world am I doing here, Jess? And just the risk of that. And I remember Mark saying to me, he goes, look, they've got really good eyesight. Don't worry about a thing. They can see really well. And I thought, well, what if I'm in the water with one that's got some problem seeing? It doesn't have such good. Anyway, it all worked out great. And it's the kind of thing, to me, it was like the very first time you ever got in the water with sharks. You're worried about, oh, sharks. And then you get in the water with them and it's like, hey, this is no big deal. That's how it was with the sailfish. But Mark, I know he's going to give a great presentation, and I think the world of him and his photography, and that's why I recommended that Dennis have him. So with that, Dennis. Oh, I can't hear you. Now I can't hear you.
Yeah,
Dennis.
yeah, I'm okay.
Okay.
I'm going to get the lights turned off, and we're going to turn it over to Mark and watch him tell us about how to approach big critters and small critters.
All right. Well, Jesse, thank you so much for your kind words. And indeed, that was an awesome once in a lifetime experience. And I still look back with many fond memories about that. But, Dennis, let me know if you are ready for me to proceed here. And if so, I'm going to go to full screen on my images.
Yeah, we are rock and rolling.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the invitation, you guys. And thanks again, Jesse, for the kind invitation. It is always so nice to be back amongst our tribe, not only marine life enthusiasts and divers, but specifically underwater image makers. And I think a lot of what we do probably mystifies the world at large, but I think we all speak the same language here. So I'm hoping to share with you today some images and tips and techniques that have worked well for me over the years in terms of approaching shy marine life. And as I'm sure you all know very well, some of the most charismatic and attractive animals in the ocean also can be some of the most difficult to approach. And there is no one surefire formula that makes it easy. Otherwise, everyone would have great images of these iconic animals. But with enough persistence and luck, I think if you try the techniques that I'm talking about, while they don't work all the time, they will at least improve your chances. And over time, hopefully result in some success. But just a few examples of animals that can be difficult to approach, even though they're probably among the slowest swimmers among the fish. Even slow swimming fish can outswim any of us, including the mola mola or the ocean sunfish. But on the not only the big animals, but on the other end of the size scale, little dartfish like this decorated dartfish are obviously very beautiful and colorful and captivating, and yet often very difficult to approach and get close enough to get good images. So they can be challenging. Fortunately, there are plenty of also beautiful subjects down there that are not especially difficult to approach or shy. And I'm very grateful for those, such as these nudibranchs that usually can't even see us coming, so they're not inclined to leave. or there's many different reasons for why some animals are easier to approach than others, but I think it all boils down to the animal's comfort level. The more confident they feel in their surroundings and in your presence, the less likely they are to take off. And usually that, or oftentimes, has to do with their own physiology, including like this porcupine pufferfish that, as we all know, is covered with spines that, if he inflates himself with the surrounding seawater, can stick out like bristles on a beach ball and make for pretty unappetizing looking mouthful. So therefore, he feels confident and is easy to approach. Other animals have other defense mechanisms, like venom, like this sea crate. And if it were to bite you, that would be very bad news because it's highly venomous. But fortunately, they're very docile by nature and not the least bit inclined to bite anyone unless you really try hard. In some cases, electric cells like this torpedo ray or electric ray can be a deterrent to predators and again increase the animal's confidence and make it unlikely to flee if you approach closely. In other cases, there are plenty of animals down there, as I'm sure you've experienced, that are masters at camouflage. And even though they may not have other defense capabilities, they're so confident in their camouflage and their ability to blend in with the surroundings that, again, they are very confident in not being seen and are therefore usually not worried about the close approach of divers and photographers. Or in some cases, we may have a combination of those traits, such as the scorpionfish that are not only very well camouflaged to blend in with the surroundings, but also possess venomous spines. Or in some cases, like this largest fish of all, the whale shark, just the sheer size and toughness of their skin. I understand that whale sharks have the thickest skin in the animal kingdom, up to 3 inches, and therefore pretty well protects them from all but perhaps orcas, I think, are about their only natural predator. So because of that, whale sharks generally are quite easy to approach and quite unconcerned about us. Whales are huge as well, but generally not nearly as approachable as whale sharks. I think a lot of it has to do with just their general intelligence and sensitivity and so on. But there are techniques that can make it easier to get closer to whales, as Jesse will tell you from his Tonga experience swimming with humpbacks, and we will talk more about those techniques here in a little bit. But in many cases, it's not only the characteristic of the animals themselves, but the surrounding environment and conditions that can make a difference. I'm sure we've all noticed that in instances of vigorous current, that fish tend to be more closely packed in schools if they're a schooling species, and they tend to face into the current because it would be to their disadvantage to do otherwise. So again, whatever makes it easy for the subjects or more attractive or makes them more comfortable, generally if they have an incentive to keep doing what they're doing, they're less likely to leave. And in the case of current like this, it does a great job in terms of organizing schooling fish to make for a nice symmetrical looking school like this. And typically, if you're diving the same site and encounter the same fish school on an occasion where there's little or no current, they will generally not be nearly as nicely organized. They'll tend to be kind of wandering all over the place, and you no longer have that nice symmetrical looking school. So if you're fortunate enough to have vigorous current, and I do think of current as a positive thing because it's very helpful in many ways to underwater photography. This is one example, is keeping your subjects pointing in the same direction. Okay, yes, you have to work a little harder to get in position, but I find very much worth the effort because instead of fleeing or just randomly wandering around, generally these fish will tend to stay put and keep their relative position so that you can get whatever shooting angle you wish. Same thing with these big-eyed jacks. And this was screaming current on this occasion. This was at Mary Island and the Solomon Islands, and others were using reef hooks. I don't really generally utilize reef hooks much just because they limit your mobility a lot, but I really had to strategize and work very hard to crawl against the current to get well up current so that I could then kick as hard as I could while gradually losing ground in the current, get ahead of the school, and then kick to slow my down current progress as I kind of did a control fly past them backwards, but to get a shot or two with each pass, and then would spend another 5 or 10 minutes crawling my way back up current again to try it again. And certainly burned a few calories there, and that's not a bad thing either. But again, was very much worth the effort. And that doesn't have to be limited to schooling fish. For individual fish as well, they behave the same way. Again, they need to point into the current. You'll never see a fish hanging out sideways in the current and holding his position because they're just not hydrodynamically oriented to do so then. So if your goal is to get portraits of even small shy fish like this square spot anthus, again, look for opportunities when there is steady current because it can very much work in your favor. There are some other strategies to consider when we're diving in current as well. If you're trying to approach a stationary subject, when there's current present, you can see from the bubbles going up from this diver, they're going up diagonally, so there's clearly plenty of current here. If they notice that this diver is approaching, first of all, low to the bottom, so that he's benefiting from the protection of some of the bottom topography and is not in a current that's quite as strong as if you're up off the bottom a few feet. But also, very importantly, he's not allowing himself to be swept down current into the subject. If he had started out directly up current from this grouper, he would soon find that he's kind of flying out of control straight towards the animal, and of course that's going to cause the animal to leave. So rather than approaching from directly up current, come in from the side so that you can hold your position and maintain the relative position that you want, and give the animal a chance to get used to you and realize that you're not a threat because you're not flying up, out of nowhere, suddenly encroaching on its space. You can approach as slowly as necessary and kind of watch the animal's body language and respect his space and let him, again, get used to your presence before you go any closer. Another very important consideration is buoyancy control. And of course, this is important just as divers, but especially when it comes to approaching shy marine life. Naturally, the more calm and graceful we can look underwater, the more we'll tend to blend in, and the more out of control and disruptive. And, if we're doing a yo-yo up and down in the water and constantly pushing inflate and deflate and all of that, that also does not escape the animal's attention, and they will generally give a wide berth to you. And certainly when you get closer to the animals, especially a potentially shy animal like this grouper, it is the buoyancy control is very important, but also the way you breathe. We all have to breathe, of course, and that's not a bad thing, but do so in a calm, relaxed manner as much as possible. Try to avoid forceful inhalations and exhalations. And the animals very much pick up on this, and their attitude towards us will be reflected in body language that includes our breathing style. And of course, the fewer bubbles, the better. And one way to avoid those noisy exhalation bubbles is to dive with a rebreather. I am not a rebreather diver myself. I in many ways kind of wish I was, at least on occasions, because of the obvious advantages in approaching shy marine life. But I thought about it long and hard, but between the huge investment financially and just I think someone told me that for every hour of diving, you can expect to do 3 hours of maintenance on a rebreather. Well, for me, there's just not enough hours in the day. So, and also traveling with rebreather stuff is not fun either, on top of all the photo stuff that we travel with. So that's a great technique for someone else, but certainly worth mentioning here. One technique that's available to all of us, and there's really no additional equipment expense at all, is breath hold diving or free diving. And although our time underwater is much more limited than with other options, I think we can all appreciate just what the name says it all, free diving, because we're unencumbered by heavy, noisy equipment, and naturally without the exhalation bubble noise and other noises associated with scuba diving, we can certainly be much more stealthy and quiet underwater, and certainly have the potential for approaching shy marine life more readily than we can with scuba. And in many cases, this might even be just on the surface. Generally, free diving is considered taboo with marine mammals. Most of them don't like it. However, there are exceptions. In the case of, and this is quite a rare photo, a free diver with a blue whale. Blue whales are so shy. Generally speaking, it's one of those marine mammals that just is not going to be curious or interested about us anyway. So I guess the thinking is, might as well free dive on them and get close enough to be within photo range, because they're not going to stick around. And that's with extremely rare exceptions, that's kind of the way it goes. But similar techniques and considerations are important for even for stationary animals like this garden eel that spends its whole life in the burrow in the sand bottom. For anyone who's ever tried to photograph garden eels, it's generally an exercise in frustration because even though they're completely out of their hole when you're 15 feet away, as you try to ease in closer, the closer you get, the more they retract into their holes. And usually, in my experience, by the time you get close enough for a shot like this, they're no longer there because they're hiding under the ground. But it does vary somewhat from one individual to another, and I think it definitely varies from one location to another, maybe even from one species of garden eel to another. But I think in areas where the garden eels do see a lot of diver traffic, they are somewhat less frightened by divers than those who never see divers. But more than anything else, it's just an exercise in patience and perseverance. And it really, I think if you're going to try a shot like this at all, you take the attitude that you're going to devote your whole dive to it. Hopefully it won't take the entire dive, but if you're not willing to invest some real time in slowly approaching the subject and giving it a chance to get used to you and so on, then you probably will not have much luck, and it's makes more sense just to go on and see something else on your dive. Similar for the other bottom dwellers like this goby and shrimp combination. And I'm sure that many of you have seen these before. There are many different species of them. I think these are among the most colorful. It's the flagtail shrimp goby and Randall shrimp taken in the Andaman Sea and the Andaman Islands off of India. But the idea is the same no matter where you find them. They share the same burrow. They are cooperative roommates. They each contribute to the common good of the household. The shrimp is the hard worker between the two. He digs the hole and shovels out sand and all that. But in the goby, for his part, he just sits there. And the goby is lazy, but he does have an important job to do because the shrimp is almost blind and would never see a predator coming if he were in danger. So the goby's job is the lookout. He has excellent eyesight, and you'll notice that the shrimp is, anytime he's outside of the hole, he always has one antenna in contact with the fin or tail of the goby. And if the goby senses danger coming, he wiggles his fin. That's the danger signal, and they both dive down into the safety of the burrow in the blink of an eye. Once they do that, they're probably not going to come back out within the time that you have to spare at whatever depth it is. So it's usually not worth putting in more time there. Better just to go find another goby and shrimp pair combination. But if you take your time in the initial approach, you may not have to worry about that because they hopefully will stay out in the open and go about their business. But again, there is no substitute for time and patience. So the idea is to get right down on the bottom when you're still at least 10 or 15 feet away from these guys. Don't start out dropping right down next to them or you'll spook them right away. Once you're on the bottom, slowly creep forward just on your fingertips, just a few inches at a time, giving them a chance to see you and get used to your presence there. Again, we're not trying to sneak up on these animals. We want them to see us, and we want them to perceive us as not a threat because we're not acting in a threatening manner. So again, patience and time as you approach them. Other animals call for completely different techniques. In the case of these white-collar butterfly fish, they were happily hovering in midwater like this when I first spotted them from 40 or 50 feet away. And I recognizing the opportunity, I didn't want to blow it by rushing in there and scattering them, which you see being done many times. But my biggest concern was that there were other divers around that might do just that and wouldn't realize that I had been investing, quite a bit of time in slowly approaching them. But my approach was to get neutrally buoyant when I was still quite some distance away. So you want to minimize any pushing of buttons. Even just a small puff of air in your inflating in your BCD is quite a noisy thing underwater. So it would be best probably to inflate orally, or again, at least do any buoyancy adjustments when you're still some distance. And then once I was confident in my neutral buoyancy, I tried to ever so slowly close the distance on the school. And in doing so, again, no substitute for time, but over the course of probably 8 or 10 minutes, I eventually got within photo range. And there's plenty of occasions where I think I've been nearly as patient and it hasn't succeeded. So again, it's not a guarantee. But if you don't try these patient, stealthy approaches, it will probably never work. And if you do try it consistently, sooner or later it will work, and you can end up with results like this. even shellfish and bivalves like this thorny oyster require some stealth to approach and photograph well. And you wouldn't think that an oyster would require a lot of stealth, but they do actually have eyes. In fact, hundreds of little blue eyes. You can see them all along the top edge of the mantle here, looking out at us. And I don't think they have great resolution, but they do see light and dark quite readily. And if you swim right up to them, especially if you cast a shadow or do a noisy exhalation, they will clamp shut and you won't see this beautiful mantle anymore. So even with stationary subjects, especially if you know them to be a bit shy or sensitive, take your time. Sometimes special techniques are called for. When night diving, many animals only come out at night because they're very shy and don't want to be seen during the daytime. So naturally putting a bright white light on them generally causes them to panic and seek cover and hide. But fortunately, most of these animals don't see red light the way that we do, and it doesn't seem to register with them. So using a red light to approach shy animals on night dives can be a very good technique. And that's the main reason that good focus lights have a red light option, and I do recommend that you use it. So eye contact is an important consideration with animals that have good eyesight, like this flounder, who I guess this is a flounder wink, I suppose, but individually rotating kind of periscope eyes. But whatever the animal is, if it has good eyesight, it's probably watching you because we're the ones who are unfamiliar in their environment, and probably something they want to keep an eye on. And how we behave will have everything to do with our success or lack of success when it comes to approaching them closely and photographing them. And in particular, it seems like sharks are very sensitive to eye contact. And if you've ever tried to get close to sharks, the non-diving public probably assumes that sharks are all ferocious and just immediately swim up and start attacking us or something. But of course, we know better. But actually, quite the opposite. Most sharks are inherently quite shy. And generally speaking, if you stare at them, they will not come close, because that's impolite in nature to stare. Usually nothing good comes from that. So their instinct is to avoid lengthy eye contact. So I've found that it really does make a difference if you're whether you're at a cleaning station with sharks, or maybe even any situation other than I guess if they're baited and there's enough food, they tend to overcome their shyness. But anytime if you're dealing with natural behavior, don't stare them down. Even though, of course, they are the object of our interest, try to look away and then look back and look away, and anything to avoid the impression that you're just staring at them. Certain sharks like the zebra shark or leopard shark are bottom dwellers and are usually found on or near the bottom, and there are some special techniques that can be helpful there. Much like the other bottom dwellers, like the goby and shrimp that we were talking about, I think it's very helpful to get right down on the bottom yourself so that you're approaching them on their own level rather than dropping in from above like some kind of invaders. Of course, we do have to drop in from above at some point, but if you are, and that's often when you'll spot these animals, if the visibility is good, they typically tend to be in the deeper edges of a reef where the reef meets the sand and so on. So that is often where you'll first sight them, is at the beginning of a dive on your initial descent. But rather than plopping right down next to them, at the kind of distance that we see this diver, if this diver plopped down right where we see him now, that shark will be out of there. There's no way he's going to let him get close. But this diver exercised patience and restraint, and instead of plopping right down in close proximity, he first dropped to the bottom 50 feet or more away. Now, I'm not saying it has to be 50 feet, but I'd say at least 20 to 30 feet distant from the animal. Get right on the bottom and then start again slowly crawling, just fingertips at a time, finger walking on the bottom as you slowly get closer. And especially as you're closing the distance and getting closer, pay close attention to the animal's body language, because many times you can tell them when they're getting a bit nervous and fidgety. They start kind of fidgeting a bit and maybe shifting their weight around a little bit. And that's true not only of leopard sharks, which are relatively approachable compared to these guys. These are giant guitarfish or shovel-nosed rays, extremely shy in spite of their big size. They can be up to 10 feet length or more, but critically endangered, by the way, sadly. But very difficult to approach in my experience. I've only gotten this close on maybe 2 or 3 occasions occasions. But so probably won't succeed no matter what you do because they are so shy. But if you're going to have any chance at all, it's only by doing that very slow, stealthy fingertip crawl approach on the bottom that you'll have any chance. And again, pay attention to their body language, especially you can see they're already kind of not completely laying on the bottom, just sort of hovering there. But if you see them, any sort of a shark or a ray that's a bottom dweller, if you see it kind of raising up on its pectoral fins, much like you see this blue spotted ray doing here, that means they're getting into launch mode. They're not comfortable with your presence. They're considering their options. They're just about to bolt. Sometimes they've already made up their mind and they're going to leave regardless. But sometimes if you're tuned in enough and you see this kind of developing, you can stop your forward motion, maybe even back off a little bit, give them a chance to settle down. And many times they will settle back down and realize, I wasn't so sure about this guy, but maybe it's not a threat. I really want to continue digging this hole looking for clams, and they'll go back to doing that. So again, paying close attention to body language can help a lot. In this case, this marble stingray, this was at a place called Black Rock up in Burma. There was close to an island surrounded by quite deep water, and I was at kind of a deep drop-off area. This marble ray came up out of the deep water and headed up towards the kind of vertical wall of the island itself, where a lot of other divers were. And I kind of figure, well, he came from deep water. That's probably where he's most comfortable. He's going to encounter this big mob of divers. There's a lot of photographers, so there's probably going to be some people chasing him and so on. And he came through, there was just a narrow gap between big rocks. And so in order to go up into this shallower area close to the island, I figured he probably has to come right back through the same gap to head back to the deep water, where I have a feeling he's going to want to be in just a couple of minutes. So rather than pursuing him, I just staked out my position there at this gap in the rocks, and kind of picked a nice background and so on, in hopes that the ray would return. And sure enough, within about 3 or 4 minutes, here he comes right by me again, and I was able to get this nice sort of pre-composed shot that I was already kind of waiting for him. Another shot with a giant guitarfish, and those are actually the only 2 of the only 3 shots that I have of these guys. But this is an image that should not have worked in terms of the photographic considerations. It was a before breakfast dive, so very little daylight, very little available light. Back in the film days with the Nikonis 5 and 15 mil lens, and I believe that was shot on 100 speed Fujichrome film, so Provia. So yeah, again, not a lot of ISO latitude there either. So everything was at the limits, wide open at f2.8, 1/30th of a second shutter speed, really too slow to freeze motion at all. But I guess nobody told me it couldn't work, so I tried anyway. And the combination of swimming parallel with the animal, not going directly towards it, but swimming parallel, and also kind of strategizing a bit. I knew that being a bottom dweller, he may have, for whatever reason, decided to swim up and investigate the shallow rocky portions of this reef, but I knew that his real comfort zone was going to be back down on the sandy bottom at the deeper edges, and that's going to be where he wants to head to. So I kind of left that pathway open to him, so I wasn't blocking his path and forcing him to do something he didn't want to do, but also taking advantage of the terrain and kind of by swimming parallel, but slowly decreasing the distance between me and the animal, and the animal is already right up against the rock. So he's kind of, as long as he's comfortable with me swimming parallel, he's not going to get any further away from me, and that allowed me to ease in within photo range. Same idea here, parallel swimming. It certainly is not a good idea to chase after the animals. That's a good way to get nothing but tail shots. But if you are in a situation where you can swim parallel with the animal, not necessarily getting close right away, but if you can kind of keep up steady swimming at a pace that allows you to stay with them at a comfortable distance, and then give them a chance to get used to your presence there and realize that, again, that you're probably not a threat because you're not acting aggressive, you're just swimming along parallel. They oftentimes do get a bit used to your presence and will tolerate you slowly closing that gap, getting within good photo range. Same technique here with the small amola or ocean sunfish, also taken back in the film days off of San Diego. And it was great just to have a chance to photograph the animal itself, but I really wanted some human interaction here as well. And that also turned out to be a great technique in terms of being able to approach the animal closely, because it was a little bit shy, and because we had it sort of sandwiched between the two of us, he was inclined to keep the same relative position there. An animal that may or may not be shy, depending on their attitude at that particular moment. But the peacock mantis shrimp, I think we can all agree, certainly an intriguing and colorful and interesting animal. They are bottom dwellers, and if you startle one or find one out in the open, they'll probably scurry away and hide in a nearby hole. But they are also very curious, and I find that if they are down in their hole, which is often you just see their compound eyes sticking out of the hole in the front part of their body. Sometimes they can't resist coming out for a look at you. And there are a few tactics that can help with this. If one thing that can help if you have like a muck stick or a reef pointer, or in the old days we used to use a telescoping portable phone antenna that had a little red tip on the end. You can kind of half bury that in the gravel and rub it back and forth in your hands and make it kind of jump around a bit and so on. Within a few inches of the entrance of their burrow, they will often come out and try to, they don't know what it is, but they want to kill it because it's an invader, and they'll whack it with their calcified fist-like appendages, trying to immobilize it. Another thing that often works, and I don't know, it's probably not the nicest way to treat the mantis shrimp, so I try not to do this all the time. I don't think it does them any harm, but they seem to be compulsive housekeepers, and they can't stand it to have a messy burrow. So if you find a mantis shrimp in the hole, I find that if you locate a small shell or pebble or two and drop it down in the hole, they immediately pop out and throw it back outside because they can't stand you cluttering up their household. So just an interesting little aside there. But in this case, we have a California sheephead. It's quite a rare photo, not because it's a rare animal at all. They're very common here in California. What's rare about it is it was taken in cold water by me, and I'm a total tropical wimp, so I'm not that inclined towards California diving most of the time. But there are some wonderful subjects to see here, and actually some very beautiful kelp forests and so on that during the warmer months of the year are pretty tolerable temperature-wise. But the California sheephead or Pacific sheephead is a wrasse. And even though I had never spent any time with sheephead prior to this dive, I spent a lot of time around other species of wrasse, and it turns out they all have similar behaviors. They're innately curious animals, and I find that if you drop a rock or a pebble or scratch around on the bottom a little bit, they can't resist coming over to have a look. And that's exactly what I did here. I just found a few loose rocks and empty shells and so on. And every time this sheephead was kind of doing a general patrol around the neighborhood, and every few minutes he'd pass by again. And whenever we were within eyesight, I would rattle the shells and rocks and drop them from a couple of feet off the bottom, and they would settle down on the bottom, and he would immediately come over to check them out. And it seemed like he never got tired of that because he repeated it a dozen times or more and gave me a chance for a number of nice close-up photos like this. Groupers also tend to be quite curious, and it's hard to say, they're not always, checking you out and so on, but generally speaking, if anything unusual going on, and they're very territorial, anything going on in their neighborhood, they're right on top of it. They want to know all about it. So whether it's, a new animal in their territory, such as us, or, something interesting visually going on, I find sometimes as I'm holding my camera and, framing the subject and waiting for it to get in a good position and so on, I can find just wiggling one or two fingers quickly. They usually don't show great curiosity, but it can be enough to get their attention and make them poke their head out of a hole when they might not otherwise. And it goes for larger groupers as well. This is a California giant black sea bass. They get to be hundreds of pounds, so they're kind of the California equivalent of a Goliath grouper. And they are very curious and territorial and not the least bit shy most of the time. And one technique that can improve your chances, and you might encounter one of these on almost any dive here, but there are certain sites that are better known for them than others. But whatever site you're at, if you can manage to be among the first divers down the anchor line when the boat first arrives at the dive site, usually if there's anything curious in the area, that's when they're going to show up. When that anchor hits the bottom and the chain's kind of maybe bouncing around a bit as the boat's swinging and so forth, they'll lose interest soon enough in that once they kind of check it out and so on. But for maybe the first 5 to 10 minutes, they may well be in the area they're checking it out. So it's worth going all the way down the anchor line in that case. But at any time during the dive, again, it's certainly possible that you might encounter an animal like this. And again, just, don't be overly aggressive. Keep your distance a little bit, let them get used to you. But if they're showing signs of curiosity, it may be your lucky day. This particular one was so curious. I have a feeling he probably had been hanging out with spearfishermen before. No one in our group was spearfishing, but he acted a bit unnaturally curious around the divers. But I was with a group of divers, and everyone else had plenty of photo ops as well. And the other divers eventually lost interest and went on their way. I couldn't imagine losing interest in a magnificent animal like this. I happily spent the rest of my dive with him and got lots of shots. But when many of these animals are less than confident in their surroundings for good reason, like these juvenile fish that are hiding in the bell of a jellyfish here. If they were out in open water without the jellyfish, they would be in great danger they would be easy pickings for almost any predator. But because they do have not only shelter, but a pretty safe place to hang out, because they are not immune to the stings of the tentacles, but they're very adept at avoiding getting stung and so on. They have confidence because they have a safe place to hang out. There's also a shrimp there on the jelly, but they're all pretty confident in their surroundings because of the stinging properties of the jellyfish tentacles, and therefore it's possible to approach them closer than you might otherwise be able to. And it's all about confidence for this white-tip reef shark. In a few places in the world, particularly the Eastern Pacific, places like Cocos and Galapagos and Socorro, it's really maybe Malpelo. Those are probably the only 4 places in the world I know of where the white-tip reef sharks tend to be very approachable. For the most part, though, in my experience, they're really quite shy. And for many years of diving with these guys in Thailand and elsewhere in the Indo-Pacific, I didn't even have a decent full body shot of one. I couldn't get close enough for that, much less a super close face shot like this. But this guy was all snuggled up in a crevice, and I guess he was so very confident in his surroundings, he didn't seem to mind at all. He allowed me to put my dome port up within probably an inch of his face, which accounts for the great detail that you see in this shot here, because of his total confidence. So it's all about confidence in surroundings. And again, one of the secrets to getting close to these animals is to be in a place they want to be. That's, first of all, how you just find them to begin with. In the case of these manatees, they're very cold sensitive. In Florida, they tend to congregate in the freshwater springs, which maintain a year-round temperature of 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Still seems cold to me, but compared to the surrounding waters, it's relatively warm. And that's where they want to be, so that's not only where you find them, but they're very reluctant to leave that warm water, and I don't blame them at all. Fortunately, there are some strict rules and regulations protecting manatees from harassment. It's sad that that's even necessary, but clearly it is. But I'm also grateful that there are enough exceptions made. I haven't gone in recent years at all, but I understand it is still possible for photographers who are well behaved and follow the rules to get in there and have some nice photo ops. It's sometimes just it's a matter of luck. If you encounter natural behavior going on that tends to have the animals distracted and preoccupied, like these hawkfish. The reaction I often get to this shot is, oh, how nice, they're kissing. Well, yeah, that's a nice thought, but actually they're not kissing, they're fighting. It's probably a territorial fight, but they are very much preoccupied, and where they might not otherwise allow me to get this close because they're busy fighting one another, they tend to be much more approachable. And in terms of other natural behaviors and distractions, well, there's probably nothing more distracting for any species than reproduction, or at least the possibility of it. In the case of these anthias, it was around dusk, which is when mating often occurs, and that it was what was about to happen right here. They're not actually spawning, but they're only a second or two after this shot was taken. They did intermingle eggs and spawn in the water column, and it's all over in the blink of an eye, and that's about as far as it goes for parental duties for most fish. But it does provide an opportunity for us to get closer than we might otherwise be able to get. And also, in the case of the male anyway, this is when they tend to put on their brightest colors to show off for the opposite sex. So it can be an especially photogenic time as well. Same thing goes for bigger animals like these leopard sharks or zebra sharks. And as you may know, for pretty much any species of sharks or rays, they can only reproduce when the male manages to bite a hold of the either the tail or fin of the female and get her flipped over so they can get into a position to copulate. I've never seen the actual mating act take place with leopard sharks, and this is the only time I've seen the foreplay like this, but it was still a pretty cool moment. And again, because they are preoccupied in their own behavior, they're not nearly as concerned about a diver or a photographer approaching closely. Same thing goes for these cuttlefish, which if they're not courting or mating, tend to be rather shy. They're not the shyest of animals, but oftentimes they will not let you get within photo range. But when they are romancing, that's almost an open invitation to get in as close as you like for really nice close-up images, because they are more interested in impressing one another and going through all the rituals of courtship and mating than about our presence. Another example of reproduction being a great distraction, in this case, these marble groupers. This was in a place called Fakarava in French Polynesia, and it's famous for the grouper spawning there. It takes place one night a year on the full moon in July. And so it's not at all likely that if you go there, that you'll actually witness the spawning, but that's okay, because really the photogenic part of it lasts much longer. It goes on for several weeks before the actual spawning event, on the weeks approaching that full moon in July. And with every passing day, there are more and more and more groupers that show up from all corners of French Polynesia, or at least within the vicinity of Fakarava. To where there are thousands, many thousands of these medium-sized, they're about the same size as a Nassau grouper, it's medium-sized groupers, all aggregating, staking out their territory, getting ready for the big spawning event. And even with pelagic species like these yellowfin tunas, you can see cool behaviors going on related to reproduction and cool photo ops that result from that. This was in the Revillagigedo archipelago of Mexico at a place called Roca Partida. It's just a very small church steeple-shaped pinnacle coming up out of very deep water, sticking up into the sky. But just an isolated pinnacle, no other islands for 60 or 80 miles or more in any direction. So a natural magnet for marine life. And I was the only one who saw these tunas on these 2 days in a row of diving here, because everyone else jumped in. There was quite strong current, and they all did the easy thing and drifted with the current to the down current end of the pinnacle and spent most of their dive there. Well, wherever you are in the world, you don't have to know the dive site especially well to figure out that the place to be is on the upcurrent end. At least when it comes to any sort of predation or activity, whether it's a natural reef or a shipwreck or a bridge piling, it's all going to be happening on the upcurrent end. So I endeavored to stay on the upcurrent end. Easier said than done. It was a screaming current, but between having long fins and positioning myself right where the current splits and goes around both sides of the rock. It's a very narrow zone there where you can hold your place. If you get more than 5 or 10 feet away from that zone, whoosh, away you go with the current. You may not be able to get back. But if you can stay and just kind of zigzagging back and forth in this one narrow area directly on the upcurrent end of the reef or the structure, you will often be able to stay there. That will enable you to not only observe, but hopefully get some good photos as well. So in this case, I was the first half of the dive, I just was considering myself very, very lucky to be in the vicinity of these animals. And I assumed that with all the activity that they were feeding, but I never really, they're zooming around, zooming past me, flashing all kinds of colors. I thought, wow, that's really cool, but what is it they're feeding on? And I never could really see any bait fish in particular. And it finally dawned on me, oh, they're not feeding, they're spawning, and they're chasing each other around trying to mate. And sure enough, that it explains everything in terms of their level of excitement and their willingness to let me get closer than I otherwise. Because usually with tunas, you're lucky to get within even sight of them, and they're not interested in being approached closely. But another exception due to the circumstances. And it did indeed allow me to get much closer to these animals than most people are ever able to. Structures, as we were talking about before, can make a big difference. In the case not a particularly shy animal, fortunately, these sand tiger sharks, also known as gray nurse sharks or ragged-tooth sharks in different parts of the world. But nonetheless, in terms of finding them and approaching them from a suitable angle and so on, it doesn't hurt if there's structure that they want to be close to. And they are very much oriented to bottom structure, whether it's shipwrecks like this guy off the Carolinas or natural reef in other parts of the world. But seeking out that structure is often key to approaching them. Again, the principle of approaching animals that want to be in a certain place and are reluctant to leave because of what's going on there. Of course, cleaning stations are a great opportunity. First of all, just to witness really interesting marine life behavior and interaction and commensalism, two different organisms benefiting one another, but also can make for great photo ops just because a fish that would otherwise be inclined to leave is not so inclined to leave if he's, in this case, receiving a valuable service like getting his teeth cleaned by this skunk cleaner shrimp. And it goes not only for shrimp, but there are certain cleaner fish as well, like these blue streak cleaner wrasses, in this case cleaning a polka dot grouper or a barramundi cod, or even big animals like this manta at Socorro being cleaned by some clarion angelfish. And even one of the most shy fish of all, the thresher shark, almost impossible to get close enough to photograph, rarely seen or photographed anywhere other than the one place in the world where they can be seen and photographed regularly, where this was taken, and that is a shoal off of Malapascua Island in the central Philippines. And, thresher sharks exist worldwide. I'm sure they visit cleaning stations worldwide as well. Why this is the only place in the world that's been identified where they show up regularly to be cleaned is beyond me, but I'm grateful for it because at least there is one place. And even here, it's not easy. They generally live in very deep water. They're very light sensitive. You can see from their huge eyes, they don't do well in bright sunlight. So they tend to live very deep and generally stay deep during the daylight hours, only come up shallower at night. However, they do have an incentive to come shallow to be cleaned. And typically this happens just early in the morning, usually just the first dive of the day. You have to leave before sunrise, have to be in the water before sunrise usually to have the best chance. But if you're patient and park yourself in the right part of the reef, many times you will get one or more passes by thresher sharks during the course of the dive. That's true for even small fish like this anthias still benefit by the services of cleaner wrasses. So it's a fascinating behavior that I never tire of watching, and again, certainly presents some outstanding photo ops if you put in enough time. Another behavior where an animal wants to stay put and is not inclined to leave is feeding. And in this case, this hawksbill turtle, it'd be great to see him under any circumstances, but especially he's in the midst of natural behavior here, chomping on some corallomorphs. And because he's busy feeding, he's not inclined to leave and is probably more tolerant of me putting my lens right up there in his face than he would be otherwise. And it goes for almost any animal that's in the middle of feeding. That is one of their priorities, to stay alive. So even an animal that might not otherwise tolerate such a close approach will generally put up with it at least long enough to swallow whatever it is he's eating. These scrawled filefish feeding on a jelly. And this is an interesting situation we used to see quite often in Thailand, where I used to work on a liveaboard, is when the current sweeps jellyfish into a rocky reef. You'll see all kinds of fish come out away from the reef to attack the jellies. And in some cases, like these filefish, they are eating the jellyfish itself. In other cases, they might be hunting the crabs and shrimp that are hiding inside the jelly, or both. But it is always kind of a free-for-all and generally a great photo op. If you see jellyfish drifting towards the reef, that's a good time to check your camera settings and get ready because there may well be a cool photo op coming up. And again, food being a major incentive. This is a gathering of gray reef sharks, but this is not a baited situation. This is, I think, the most sharks I've ever seen in a natural behavior situation. There is food involved, but it's not a result of baiting. The only food involved here, and it's not obvious in this photo, but this is the same location as all those marble groupers in Fakarava. And anytime you have a huge volume of animals showing up to spawn, there's probably corresponding volume of predators showing up that want to make a meal of them. And so this is a very predictable gathering of gray reef sharks that happens every year there. And there's an impressive number of gray reef sharks there even throughout the year, just as the normal population, but the population doubles and triples and more so during the time of year of the grouper spawning because of the abundance of food. Another very special situation is where we have migrating bait fish. And this does occur in a number of places in the world, in some places in a very spectacular way. This shot was taken offshore of Magdalena Bay, Mexico. It's on the Pacific coast of the Baja Peninsula in the open Pacific Ocean. And it is what has become known as the Mexican sardine run. They are not necessarily sardines, although they may be. There's any of about 3 or 4 different species of these small bait fish about the size and shape of a cigar that migrate up along the coast there at a specific time of year. For that area, it is usually November is prime time, but anywhere October to early December. But it's hard to predict exactly where the bait fish may be on any given week. They move around a lot. Some years are better than others, so it's very much a hit or miss kind of thing. But if you're lucky, it can be spectacular. And it's the only place in the world I know of where you have striped marlin and sea lions showing up to feed on together in open ocean like this. But there's also the possibility for almost anything else showing up. Various different whales, dolphins, sharks. Sometimes you never know what may show up. But that's a big part of the appeal to me, is just the intrigue and the uncertainty of it, the element of the unknown. But and it is also physically exhausting. It is one of the most physically taxing activities I've done in the water, because it's not just casual snorkeling. These sardines are moving. It is all you can do to keep up with them, and they're being pursued by some of the fastest predators in the world as well. Most of the time, you get in the water, swim, 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 and oh, too late. No luck, back in the boat, try again, and repeat, repeat, repeat throughout the day. But every now and then, the predators have done a good enough job of rounding up the bait fish that you have a bait ball that is more or less stationary, and that's the holy grail. That's the situation that you're looking for. Another shot from the same area, in this case, a sea lion with a school of sardines. But it is all snorkeling. There's no scuba diving for this stuff. It's not so much that the animals would be shy about the bubbles, just it would not be practical, because you're in and out of the boat so very often and swimming so far fast and hard that it just wouldn't be practical to go with scuba gear. But again, a lot of work, a lot of effort, and no certainty to it. But when everything comes together, the results can be spectacular. And I don't know of any other place in the world where photographers have an opportunity to see and photograph billfish like the striped marlin in their natural habitat, doing natural behavior. This is not an animal that's been hooked or caught or anything like that. He's there because he wants to be. And similarly, off the Yucatan coast of Mexico, this is a trip that Jesse Cancelmo and I were on a number of years ago. We were talking about earlier tonight, and probably one of the most fun and exciting and terrifying things I've ever done in the water was with these sailfish in Mexico. And it's not that the sailfish want to spear us, certainly not, and that's goes for the marlin as well. They're just there to feed on the bait fish. But you do have to remember that they have a potentially lethal sharp 4-foot spear on the end of their nose, and they are possibly the fastest of all fish. And if they wanted to spear you with it, there'd be nothing you could do about it. Fortunately, they don't. In fact, they very much don't want to have an accident. But we did have an incident years ago on the liveaboard where, and this was a rare exception to the rule, where I think that particular sailfish actually did. It was aggravated or something. It actually did purposely spear one of our guests. But again, that's just rarer than rare, and it's not even worth thinking about in terms of a risk, because it would be extremely unlikely to ever happen again. But I still had trouble getting that out of the back of my mind while I was in the water with these sailfish and sardines. One interesting thing that I'm sure Jesse remembers from that is, although most of the time we just weren't able to catch up with the schools of sardines, and it was swim, 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 back in the boat, try again, swim, 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 try again. But eventually, when you did get one of these stationary bait balls, suddenly these poor sardines have no friends in the world. Everything in the ocean wants to eat them. You got all the game fish coming up from below and birds diving down from above, and they have nowhere to hide out there in the open ocean. And then we show up. Well, suddenly you are their new best friend. And these sardines make a beeline for you, and they will hide under your armpits and behind your neck. And the sailfish come charging in after them, swinging that bill back and forth. And it is pretty exciting. In fact, most of the time I tried to keep my eyes open and keep shooting and so on. But more than once, I found myself just instinctively, when there are 3 or 4 sailfish charging right at me at top speed, just closing my eyes and tucking up into a fetal position and just like, ah! And then for a moment, and then you realize, oh, okay, I'm still intact here. And most of the time you realize, okay, the sardines are still fluttering there and the sailfish have broken off the attack. But once or twice, the sailfish did not break off the attack, and I opened up my eyes and, oh, there are no more sardines. There's just some scales fluttering down from under my armpit. And that means that sailfish went in there and whacked that sardine out from under my armpit with its bill. And during the few moments that my eyes were closed, and like, wow, I'm just grateful that they are so good at their job. But going off in kind of a little different direction now, in terms of things that so far we've been talking about natural food sources enticing the animals to get closer or allow us to get closer. But there are some things that we can do to maybe imitate food sources. And this is a trick that I've been shown by dive guides in several different places in the world, just using a plastic water bottle, about half full of water, half full of air. Take it down in your BCD pocket or something. But if you're in the vicinity of certain schooling predatory fish like jacks, for instance, or trevallies, by crunching this water bottle, I guess the theory is that it sounds or feels, makes vibrations in the water similar to that of fish bones being crushed, if a predator's crunching down on its prey. But for whatever reason, that oftentimes is like ringing the dinner bell for these predators like these giant trevallies, and they may come charging in. It's very exciting to see. Other places you might have the same species of predators and they don't react at all. So it's also a hit or miss thing. But it's quite exciting when it works. But this is something you may not want to try yourself. It may be better to leave it up to the experienced dive guide who knows the area, because sometimes the reaction is not necessarily what you planned on. Maybe you saw a school of jacks there when you started crunching the water bottle, but suddenly you're confronted with this, a large shark right up in your face, because they respond to these kind of signals as well. So it might be just what you wanted, but be careful for the reactions that you get there. On a much mellower note, again, talking about going to where the food source is, filter feeding animals like this manta naturally are drawn to where there are concentrations of plankton. And just, swimming around on a reef, hoping that you might chance upon the encounter of a manta ray, well, that's nice. And if you're lucky enough to encounter one that way, that's great. But if you want to improve your chances, go to where the food source is. And there are occasions where you may notice that several currents have come together to create like a plankton slick of concentrated plankton in one narrow strip, like a highway lane on the surface of the water. And that's the situation that we had here. And I noticed the same handful of mantas just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth on the same strip of plankton on this current line where the plankton was most concentrated. So that was very convenient and allowed us to just kind of position ourselves there and wait for the mantas to keep making passes. Or in a little more contrived but very effective way, I'm sure you're all familiar with the night manta dive on the Big Island of Kona. And that is, I think it was discovered quite by accident that some lights from one of the resorts there was attracting plankton and therefore attracting the mantas every night. But the dive industry has paid attention and actually developed it into quite an industry where very predictably, pretty much every night, dive boats show up and place constant on dive lights on the bottom and sometimes on the surface as well to create plankton, which very readily attracts these reef mantas. And it's again, it tends to be very predictable and it's almost guaranteed manta sightings. But sometimes nature doesn't cooperate with us and we can't count on the natural bait or food source to show up. So we have to take things into our own hands a little bit. And this was another trick that Jesse and I saw demonstrated on the Yucatan sailfish trip, was on the days that we did not have, actually there was only one day that we didn't have good schooling sardine action. But on that day, the crew still had some cool tricks up their sleeve, because we went into kind of sport fishing mode. And of course, the idea was not to catch the sailfish, but just to attract them. So they trolled natural rigged baits, rigged ballyhoo, just like they would if they were sport fishing, except with no hook. And the idea was to, the bait skitters along on the surface as if it's a live bait fish trying to escape. And of course, that attracts the attention of predatory fish like these sailfish. And you can see that from the surface when they come up on the bait, they're trying to swat at it and kill it with their bill and so on. Well, we were all sitting on standby with snorkel gear on, cameras in hand, ready to go for hours on end. But when a sailfish would pop up in the wake and start attacking a bait, the captain would yell, "Go, go, go, go!" And the snorkelers all slip into the water. And the captain very skillfully would troll the baits right by in front of our camera lens. So we would often get at least one good pass as the sailfish went by close to our lenses in pursuit of that bait fish. But then the moment it got past us, rather than continuing to troll, the captain would throw the boat into neutral, and they had a live well full of some live baits. And the first mate, who I guess his first career must have been an outfielder or something, because he was throwing with great accuracy, throwing these live baits to start plopping, landing all around us in the water. But he mentioned early on that you can't just throw healthy bait fish because they'll sprint away and the sailfish will follow them and you won't have the sailfish anymore. You got to injure them first. And I'm sure the PETA probably would not approve of this, but these bait fish are doomed one way or the other anyway. But the mate would kind of give them a little twist, body twist before he threw them, which hampered their swimming motions and encouraged the sailfish to stick around closer to us and give us a few more shots. But for better or worse, food certainly is one of the more effective ways to get close to these animals. And I know it's controversial. It is not natural behavior when we feed the animals. And there is a good reason that we're not encouraged to feed grizzly bears. And you could make the same argument for sharks or a lot of other marine life, although I don't believe that it's necessarily the same. I think it does vary a lot from one species to the next. Certainly for animals that are not dangerous, it is a way to get closer to them when you otherwise would not be able to, such as this Napoleon wrasse, who would never get within photo range if not for the incentive of some food. Same could be said for this clown triggerfish, a notoriously shy reef fish. I spent years just trying to get within regular photo range of one of these with not much luck. But there was, when I worked on the liveaboard in Thailand, we would visit the same reef week after week. So I befriended this one particular individual clown trigger and made an offering every week of some prawn heads that he very much enjoyed. And he got more and more comfortable around me. And before the end of the season, I had him actually swimming into my framer, the wire framer of an Aconus, with a close-up kit to pose for this photo. And trying to get a clown triggerfish to stick his head inside a wire framer like that could only happen with the incentive of food. So bribery will get you everywhere. And kind of same idea here. I was asked by the Blancpain watch people to do a promo photo of a certain watch they were selling, and it didn't really give me much to go on other than they wanted a cool underwater photo. I said, well, it would be cool to have some marine life interacting there, but I didn't really know how to do that. So I thought, well, this is a reef that's used to seeing divers. The fish are pretty approachable anyway, but I took the watch and drizzled around on a plate with some prawns with some shrimp and made sure that it smelled all fishy and so on, and took it down there stuck it on the reef, and sure enough, within less than a minute, this colorful grouper swam up to investigate it and allowed me to get this shot. So again, bribery will get you everywhere. Now, I'm not advocating feeding the fish. It does work, but there are negative aspects of it, and especially when it involves toothy creatures like moray eels. I think the dive industry as a whole has kind of realized that feeding morays is generally not a good idea. It used to be very popular back in the 70s and 80s until, the number of people getting bitten finally told us something, I guess, that maybe this is not such a good species to feed. This shot was not taken offering food, but I would say, think twice before you offer food to an animal that could be aggressive and dangerous. Same thing could certainly be said for sharks, maybe even to a greater extent, but they're not the same as moray eels, and in many ways. But I think by and large, the record shows that there's plenty of shark attraction dives being conducted around the world, most of them with excellent safety records. So while there is great potential for harm there, I think for the most part, depending on how it is conducted, the sharks generally seem to understand the rules, and it is not a case of them just becoming overly aggressive towards all divers. In most cases, as soon as the food runs out, they go back to their natural behavior. I'm not saying it doesn't change their behavior at all, but that by and large, it's effective and for the most part quite safe. And you could argue the propriety of it or the safety of it, all day. And I'm not saying that any point of view is wrong on that, but there's one thing that I think is without question is that in terms of photographic productivity, you just won't be able to get close to these animals consistently without the incentive of food, with very few exceptions. It's certainly true for this tiger shark, which, in spite of their ferocious reputation, are usually quite shy around scuba divers. This is at Tiger Beach in the Bahamas. These silvertip sharks in the Burma Banks, there's no way they would have come close enough for a photo without the incentive for some food. And quite an unusual shot here, kind of one of my signature shots with both the juvenile and the adult female in the shot at the same time. They may or may not be mother and child, but could well be because there was a small population of silvertips at this particular dive site, but kind of nice to think so anyway. Or even this oceanic white-tip shark, which is an animal known for not being shy. Actually, they are not the least bit shy. Usually they swim right up and may well try to bite you if you encounter one in open water. But even then, without the presence of bait, they usually won't stick around long. It'll be a fleeting opportunity as opposed to a prolonged opportunity in the presence of maybe just a bit of bait. But just do be aware that, of course, baiting in any animal does change its behavior. And if it's a potentially dangerous animal, it could become dangerously aggressive. So certainly not something to do on your own. I would say, if at all, only when it's conducted by experienced professionals should you be involved with baiting of sharks or other dangerous animals. One rare exception here, I guess, and not that it doesn't take expertise, but that at least in terms of danger, whale sharks are fortunately not dangerous to humans, but you can still benefit by baiting them. And this is, granted, not natural behavior, but it is one of the more reliable ways to see whale sharks is to do something that attracts them, makes them want to show up. This is one of several places in Indonesia where they have these fishing platforms that the fishermen, years before divers showed up there, used to amuse themselves by tossing hands full of fish over the side to the passing whale sharks. The whale sharks have caught on and made a habit of visiting these fishing platforms, so now it's a great attraction for divers as well. There are certainly cases where food is not the incentive. By and large, dolphins and other marine mammals are not interested in handouts from humans, but sometimes they are curious. For the most part, not. And I think this is a surprise to most non-divers, is, for all their reputation as being playful and curious and all that, I think non-divers probably imagine that we divers play with dolphins all the time because, after all, Flipper, they're curious and playful. Well, as we all know, usually not, but there are thankfully a few exceptions to that. For the most part, most places in the world, if you're going to interact with marine mammals at all, it must be snorkeling because they don't like scuba gear, the noise of the bubbles and so on. But there are a few notable exceptions. This photo was taken at one of those places at Socorro, or the Revillagigedo archipelago in the eastern Pacific in Mexico. For some reason, and I don't know that anyone really understands why, other than maybe it is a cultural thing within this particular family, extended family of dolphins, that the word has kind of gone around among them that, hey, these humans are okay to hang out with. And even though dolphins in other parts of the world are very shy and standoffish, these particular bottlenose dolphins seem to enjoy the company of divers and very regularly visit divers and interact with them. And in fact, the boats that have been operating there for years say this is actually increasing in frequency and reliability. So it kind of all adds up that it may well be a cultural thing, and that as each generation comes along, that it's more and more the norm for them to interact with divers. So that's a wonderful situation, and one that I hope will continue. The same is said for, I have not been to Rangiroa in French Polynesia, but I understand there's a population of dolphins there that are similarly comfortable with divers, and sometimes even seemingly asked to be petted, swim up and offer themselves to be petted and touched by the divers. So really an amazing experience if you get that chance. Somewhat less so for the spotted dolphins in the Bahamas, although they are one of the species that does seem to be curious about humans in general, but in this case, usually not scuba gear. Usually it's best snorkeling. And this was taken on an area called the White Sand Bank in the northern Bahamas that, for whatever reason, the dolphins no longer hang out at. But fortunately, there are other places in the Bahamas, notably Bimini, where you can encounter many of the same species. And if you're lucky, they may be similarly curious and give us some photo ops. A species that I've been told is quite inherently curious. These particular ones, the one time I was in the water with them, it's a Pacific white-sided dolphin, did not act curious at all, about us anyway. But and this was offshore of Magdalena Bay. It was on a day where there wasn't much happening with the marlin and the sailfish, so we thought we'd give this a try. And the dolphins showed zero interest in us snorkelers. However, they were very interested in bow riding on the skiff that we had been aboard. So they dropped us off, and then the skiff ran circles round and round and round at high speed at a maybe, I don't know, 200-foot diameter circles with us right in the middle. And as they went round and round, the dolphins were right on the bow of the boat, leaping and frolicking, having a great time, and for the most part ignoring us, but we were just within sight of them. And so with just about once an RPM, every time the boat went around, one or two of the dolphins would zip over to us for just a nanosecond, have a quick look, and then zip back to the boat. But so it was very fleeting, and it's so fast that I didn't think I got any photos at all. It was just like a fin here, a tail there, hardly even time to think about composing. But they did it consistently over a period of about 10 minutes. And when it was all said and done, I had wasted about 30 frames or so. But to my amazement, there was this one decent frame there. So that's a technique that does, at least on occasion, work. Another thing that's very important for approaching these shy open ocean animals like this leatherback turtle is to get into the water quietly. And before I learned that, I was in the habit of doing back rolls until the captain pointed that. But we had several other opportunities with leatherbacks that I blew by doing a back roll. And the captain was telling me, yeah, the turtle was totally relaxed, just chilling out there on the surface until you did your back roll, and then it immediately dived. So we eventually clued in and started slipping into the water quietly, and it made all the difference. And by the way, that is very important for marine mammals. If you want to have any chance of getting a close approach for especially whales like these humpbacks, it is critical to be quiet in the water. And it's not that we want to sneak up on them and surprise them, anything but that. The idea is you want them to know that you're there. They do know that you're there, but to do so in a quiet, unobtrusive way, because these marine mammals are very sonically oriented, and even something that we might think of as a barely noticeable splash, they hear very loudly. So the idea is to minimize any splashing, no jumping in the water, slip into the water quietly, keep your fin tips below the surface. Sometimes it helps to turn sideways on the surface as you're swimming to keep your fins completely below the surface. No arm swimming. And most of all, exercise patience and restraint. The idea is not to go charging up to them. If you're lucky enough to find them just resting on the surface, that's very much the behavior you want to continue. So you don't want to do anything to disturb them or change that behavior. So keep your distance initially, give them a chance to get used to you, give them a chance to realize that you are not a threat because you are not acting in an aggressive or threatening way. Be patient. Many times you'll see just from the body language of the animals. And this is unusual for them both to be on the surface. This is kind of a holy grail moment where they're both logging, as they say, just floating on the surface like logs. More often with humpbacks, you'll see them resting at depth. And by the way, this is the time of year, our winter time, whether it's northern or southern hemisphere. It's at a time of year where they have left their polar waters where they feed and spend much of the year, either in the Arctic or Antarctic, and migrate to tropical islands and shallower waters where there's less of a chance of predators and a more conducive environment for giving birth and mating and giving their babies a chance to get a good foothold in life before they start this massive migration of thousands of miles back to the colder waters where their food source is. So anything that we can do to be unobtrusive during these interactions is to our advantage. So give them a chance to get used to us by approaching slowly. Keep your distance until they get a chance to, again, to get used to you. Watch their body language. Especially the mother, if you see her holding her pectoral fins out, it's like stay away, she's trying to tell you something there. But on the other hand, if she drops her pectoral fins down low, kind of the opposite of a shark, pectoral fins down is a relaxed mode. And you can see, okay, well, she's visibly relaxed. She may be okay with us interacting with the baby. Now, it's still not up to us to approach the baby. It must be on their terms. So we don't approach the whales closely. We let the whales approach us. So the idea is get just within sight, and then it's up to them. If they want to interact, if they become curious, they will. If they're not interested, they won't, and they'll go on their way, and that's just the way it rolls. And you try again and again until you get an opportunity with an animal or a pair of animals that are curious. and their behavior and moods change just like us. So just because an animal might not be interactive, for one period of time, if you catch the same ones later in the day, it may be their mood has changed completely and they would be agreeable to interaction. Now, again, it is not up to us to approach the animals, but if they approach us, it can be magic. And in particular, it is the calves like this one, the young whales that tend to be curious. And like any young animal, kind of like a playful puppy, they're curious about their environment and the animals in it, and they want to come check us out. So if it's an initial encounter and the mom's still not sure, you'll see her kind of keep the baby very close to her. But at some point, if the humans have been well behaved and everything goes right, you can see the mother relax and kind of give permission to the calf, like, okay, Junior, go play if you want. And typically this will happen when they're both resting at depths of 30 or 40 or 50 feet, which they can do for the adult can stay there 35 or 35 minutes at a time, but the calf must surface and breathe every 6 to 9 minutes. So that's when the best photo ops usually happen, is when the calf comes up to breathe. If the mom's comfortable with it, it may be not just for a breath or two, but a play with the human session before it eventually heads back down to mom. And then at some point they will both come up. Anytime that the mom comes up to breathe, the calf always does as well. And that's where you get your photo ops for the mom and calf together. So certainly not something that happens every day, but like a lot of these encounters, there's no substitute for, well, luck, but to improve your luck, put in the time and effort. So, I wouldn't go on a whale trip for less than 5 days, for instance, and the more time you can spend, the better chances that the odds are going to work out in your favor, both in not only in terms of animal behavior, but weather and water clarity and all the other many things that have to come together to get great encounters and great close-up photo ops. But when it does all come together, it can be awesome, and I think very much worth the effort.
Yeah, Mark, we have about 5 minutes more because we have two contests we have to show.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And actually, the timing's perfect because I have just about at the end here. So just want to say that, it's not all about approaching shy marine life. Of course, there's many other reasons to dive and photograph underwater and so on, but I think it is one aspect that certainly has appeal. And in terms of, capturing the beauty and excitement of all the things that we see underwater, including, bigger animals or animals that are otherwise hard to get close to, will certainly enrich your diving experience and hopefully add to your portfolio as well. So again, these techniques are none of them will work all the time, but all of them work at least some of the time. So if you practice these techniques regularly and are patient and persevere, I think you will find that they're helpful, and I certainly hope so. Just a few closing notes here. As I don't know if it got mentioned early on or not, but I don't get to, like most of us, I don't get to go diving in cool places all the time, if only. But my day job is working at Blue Water Photo in the Los Angeles area, selling underwater camera gear. We also have another branch of the company that specializes in dive travel. That's Blue Water Dive Travel. And we also sell dive gear for that matter. So if you need any of the above, please don't be shy. Reach out, let me know. I'm easy to reach either by way of the Blue Water Photo or my own website, markstrickland.com. My email address, mark@markstrickland.com. So please let me know. But I do get to lead dive trips and underwater photo workshops a few times a year. And so it's a perk that I very much live for. And I would love to see some of you guys on these trips as well. It's always great being with other underwater photographers, but that it not only is, I think, a more conducive atmosphere to enjoying your diving when you're among other underwater shooters, but it also helps with your productivity to be in a photo-oriented group with photo-oriented dive guides who are not going to insist that you keep up pace on a guided tour, but rather they take their time and they know kind of what our objectives are and help us achieve those. And one great example of that is a trip that I'm doing this year, this late June into early July at Dumaguete. It is, I don't know if any of you have stayed at the Atmosphere Resort. I have not actually, but I've heard wonderful things about it. Super comfortable, luxurious resort, right on the water with great diving, just amazing critter photography right there in front of the resort. There's a great house reef and many nearby dive sites as well. This is a 7-night trip. that includes a free photo workshop. You don't have to participate in the workshop, but there is no charge for it. Again, it's bound to be a great trip. That is this coming June and July, and very affordable, starting at less than $2,500 per person. In 2026, I'm leading a trip in the Sea of Cortez. This is the northern Sea of Cortez, the Mid-Drift Islands. The gateway city is Albuquerque, of all places, so seems like kind of a surprising gateway for an international liveaboard trip, but it actually makes it very easy to get to there. A lot of great marine life, large and small. On the small end of the scale, some incredible nudibranchs and gobies and blennies and so on, jawfish, but on the big end of the scale, sea lions and whale sharks as well. So that's going to be 2026, end of August, early September. And one that I'm really looking forward to, because I just can't get enough of the place, Cocos Island. Of course, the island of the sharks, very famous for sharks and all things big in terms of marine life. And that is going to be 10 nights on the new Cocos Island Aggressor in 2027. So a few years away, but not too early to start thinking about making reservations, because these trips do fill up fast. And I'm going to be leading each of these, and it would be wonderful to see you guys on some or all of those. So I hope you'll keep that in mind, but also please let me know if you have any questions about underwater photo gear or dive gear, and give me a call just to chat or tell me about your latest trip. I am at Blue Water Photo every weekday, and I look forward to hearing from you. So thanks again, you guys, and thanks again for having me.
Yeah, Mark, as it turns out, Henry Ragland, who is here tonight, you still here? Yeah, right.
Yep.
He says he's going to be on your Dumagetti trip.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Henry, I look forward to seeing you there. Good deal.
Yeah.
We will see you there in June, or late June and July, first part of it.
That's right. Good deal.
I had
Oh,
one thing.
I'm sorry. I had two more slides. So sorry. I promise only take a second, but I just realized. Just a token of my appreciation for you guys and inviting me, and also just something that my boss is happy to do, especially for underwater photo groups like yours. I got a couple different discount codes for you. For dive gear, 15% off any dive gear for any HUPS members. The coupon code, as you can see here, HUPS Dive. Just enter that at checkout, either from an online purchase or over the phone, and you will get 15% off any dive gear that we sell. Similarly, for photo gear, this is 10% off photo gear. It's pretty much wide open with the exception of Nauticam, because Nauticam does not allow us to discount at all. And any of the actual cameras and lenses that we sell, like Nikon or Sony cameras and lenses, are excluded, but otherwise 10% off any photo gear order. So if you're thinking about big or small order, hopefully that will help your pocketbook a little bit and make things easier. So do keep that in mind. And with that, I will officially sign off here. So thanks again, you guys.
Thank you very much, Mark. That was really, really excellent. I do have one comment. I had a friend of mine that was on the Indo Siren 2 weeks before it burnt, and his name was he was a dive master, dive guide, Stefan Lega, and he had a way of attracting fish that I thought was interesting. And it always worked. He would get out there and he would exhale, and then he would he'd swipe down through the bubbles, and you'd have this huge bundle of bubbles out there. And the fish would always come around. I guess they thought it was food.
Wow.
Yeah, I called him the fish whisperer. Hey, thanks so much. I do appreciate everything. I know everybody else did. We're going to have to get, do we have any other questions? One question or two questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Close to the beginning of your program, you showed a very small puffer. What was it inside?
I may
It almost looked like it was inside a larger fish's mouth, but I couldn't tell. But yes, number 4.
Oh, okay. Well, that's actually not just a small fish. It's a porcupine puffer fish, and it's inside a barrel sponge.
Yeah.
In the, okay, that's a sponge. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep. And he's very comfortable there, which is probably why he allowed me to approach so closely.
Yeah.
All right, if we don't have any
Oh,
more, we have
Oh,
to
let
get
me
on
ask
with.
Mark,
Yeah, one more.
Dennis, let me ask Mark one question. Mark, oh, again, that was fantastic. That was a really, really good and lots and lots of good ideas for photography.
Thank
But here's my question. For humpback whales,
Mhm.
I've been to the Silverbanks twice. I've been to Tonga once, which Tonga was way more productive than the Silverbanks were. Where have you found, I know you've been to French Polynesia, I have not, but where have you found to be, what location have you found to be the best location for humpback whales?
I'm still looking for the perfect place. I'm not sure if it exists, but I've been to mostly to Tonga and Moorea in French Polynesia.
Mhm.
And those are both excellent choices. There are pros and cons to each. There are other places in French Polynesia as well that I'm intrigued about. There is well to the south of Tahiti and Moorea is Rurutu, and that is said to have predictably very clear water, more so than the other places that we've mentioned, but
Mhm.
also colder water. So that's
Yeah.
puts me off a little bit. And I think I think not much protection there. If it gets windy, that you may be kind of out of luck. So that's the pros and cons there. I've also last year I did without my usual French Polynesia trip and instead went with some friends to the small island nation of Niue, which is it's out in the middle of nowhere. It's not close to anything, but it's a protectorate of New Zealand. It's about 1,000 miles northeast from Auckland, but quite an involved trip just getting there. You cross the date line 4 times just to do that trip. You
Oh.
fly from West Coast USA to Auckland and then cross back over the date line to Niue and then back to Auckland and back to the States again. So it's not a quick or short trip getting there. They also are very protective of the whales there, which is a good thing for the whales, certainly. But I found it a little frustrating. Everyone there, I find the
Yeah,
rules.
I'm gonna have to throw the red flag here, Mark.
Sure, yeah.
We're running
We
out
can
of
chat about
time.
it later.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mark. Thanks again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have to be out of here by 9.
Sure.
Stop sharing, please. Stop sharing the screen. Turn
Yep.
off your sharing.
There we go.
Thank you, Mark. It was great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again, you
My
guys.
phone call, I'm sorry, it's my grandmother's caretaker.
So, guys,
All right,
I'm going to bail because I got to get back with my day job stuff now. But thanks again, and hope to hear from you all soon.
Thank you
Thanks very much, Mark.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Mark. Hey, I'll stay in touch.
Do both. January. 4 minutes. Wow, am I surprised? I am so surprised. Hey. That was after January. We got one more. Yeah, we're doing okay.
That's gonna be a good.
I didn't place this
Oh,
at
you
all.
didn't have
That's
the
the way it
first-
happens.
the first- didn't place
It's
it.
by scores.
It's by number. There's nothing to place this.
How many people are going to look up?
I'll go.
I am.
Okay.
One, two, three.